Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ethan's Astrology podcast. I am here for another episode with my wonderful fellow astrologer friend, Tan Astrology. And we are continuing our series on the Angular Triads, which are collections of houses in astrology that all correspond around a common theme. And today's theme will be the triad of the home, looking at houses 3, 4, and 5. So, before we get into it, Tan, could you introduce yourself again to the audience?
Hi everyone, my name is Tan and I'm an astrologer. I mainly focus on relationship astrology, synastry, composite chart readings, but I do all kinds of readings, also including some human design and gene keys. So like really, just multitasking here with these metaphysical systems. And I'm mainly on YouTube, and that's how I met Ethan, my fellow astrologer here. So
Yes.
yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yes. Tan is so multifaceted and really amazing at synastry as well, you guys. She can tell you so much about your relationships with astrology, which I can't wait for that triad, the triad of relationships, which will be next.
Oh, yeah.
Or
That's
we
gonna
look
be
at the
fun.
seventh house. But we today are taking a look at the bottom part of the chart, where the angular triad we're exploring deals with home and family. So, angular triads start with the angular house, which in this case would be the fourth house. And then it tells the story of that house and the two houses that sandwich around it. So that would be houses 3, 4, and 5 all together, telling some sort of story about home and family and roots. So, Tan, would you like to kick us off with just your pitch for the fourth house and what it's all about as our angular house in the chart?
Yes, thank you. I would love to do that. So, when I look at the fourth house, which is at the very bottom of your chart, this is kind of a private place. And when you think about your home, it is sort of private. You don't just let anybody into your home. Maybe some people do, but a lot of people are a bit selective about who they let in because it's a place that is supposed to bring you comfort and a place where you go to retreat at the end of the day, where you go to sleep, where you have to shower. It does a lot of the things for you, like the actual physical home. But of course, it's also the place where it holds people that are very private to you, like your parents, and even further than that, which is like your grandparents, your ancestors. These are even sometimes the stories around them are something that, sometimes you prefer to keep in the family itself. And of course, we can say sometimes we, in romantic relationships, we want to keep it private, but this is a little bit different from that because I see like these three houses, like four, and of course, three and five, as being more like we keep private as a group, as a family unit, or as a, small community. So we
Mm.
keep that private instead of just one-to-one privacy. So that's how I look first at, this fourth house. And I always feel like the fourth house can really answer a lot of questions that are about, where are you from? We get that
Mm.
question a lot, but here it's like you can go very deep into that. Like, where are you actually from? What's your root? What's your emotional foundation? That's all about you and where you came from. What's your ancestral trauma? That's can be
Mm.
found in the fourth house. Where did you come from in terms of that? So yeah.
Yeah, and what I also find really interesting about the fourth house is if the chart were a clock, the fourth house technically begins at midnight. So it is the beginning of a brand new
Yes.
day. It's like a brand new cycle that's starting in the fourth house as well. And so I think that that
Mm.
can also represent the breaking away from the family or from what's come before and starting a new cycle on that ancestry lineage level. And I think that that can carry a lot of mystery. You know, the fourth house is technically, again, midnight, the middle of the night, where we have the least light available to us. So there's also something dark and mysterious about it. And you're trying to start this new chapter and you're trying to take the lineage you come from and grow it into something new. But I think there can be a lot of confusion and mystery about how you're supposed to do that also.
Mm. Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about, well, all three of the houses I was talking about today, but we talk about now the fourth house, when you talk about lineage and like, you know, moving away from that, where we're coming from, and then redefining ourselves from that because of that midnight point. It also makes me think about how we are as human beings on this similar journey. And we probably all, I mean, we can say we sort of came from the same, similar. There's many different
Hmm.
theories about where we all come from, but that we are all brothers and sisters in a way as well. And of course, that's okay. Now we're kind of going to like the third house, just, talking about siblings and stuff. But yeah, that's the fourth
Yeah.
house, is really the foundation of that. Like the root of that, how we were all coming from, what unifies all of us together. Not just in, yes, we can talk about just in our immediate family, in our bloodline, but could we, have the same blood? Could we also be coming from the same tribe, the same unit?
Absolutely. In that way, I think that besides just the personal, private sphere, the fourth house can also relate to topics in the world like history or like the
Yeah.
foundations of, if you're looking at an inceptional chart for a nation, what are like the foundations that that nation is built upon? What is at the
Yeah.
very root and what goes deep? What is the deep history there? Because I think that the fourth house really is like the anchor point of the chart. I mean, you could argue it's the
Yeah.
ascendant, which is the helm, which is sort of stapling together the day half of the chart and the night half of the chart. But the fourth house, if, the chart had to sit somewhere, it would be there. So what is your foundation built upon is also what the fourth house can talk to us about.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm having these images that are coming through to me, and it's like the just the image of like an actual home. And you can have one that's like built in the 18th century or something, and then it has the foundation of what was, how the technicalities and tools that you would use to build something in the 18th century. But then, that family probably uh, dies, and then you have a new family that inhabits the home. But then, as the time changes, you might renovate that home. And then, as a new generation comes in, you renovate that home. So that's similar to what it would exist in terms of the foundations, the structure. Would that always exist? Would you change that? If you have a firm foundation, firm structure, it can last longer. It can create
Mm,
legacy. If you have a shaky foundation, you may need to have a completely reinvention of who you are because of the shaky foundation that could have existed in your home, as with the analogy of the house, for example.
mm.
So
Yeah,
it's just really interesting to look at it like that. Yeah.
I really like the word foundations for the fourth house because I think if you look at it in a historical sense, it is the family, the lineage, the history, but in a more active present tense it is how you are actively building the foundations of your life now. Like, what resources might you also have in the fourth house to build a stable foundation for yourself? Like, do you have, a really lovely planet there, like Venus, and friendship plays a role in building that foundation? Or might you have a really difficult planet there, like Mars, and it's like you're constantly having to fight to build that foundation over and over again. And maybe there's learning, like when you need to let go of the fight versus when you need to engage it. So really, it's also going to depend on what's living in the fourth house that's going to help you know what resources you have to build a new foundation with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at it in terms of what planets do you have there, or even like what sign is ruling your fourth house, then you can really get a sense of the resources that you have available. And what's also really interesting is I found that people with whatever planets, let's say they have planets in the fourth house, it's really hard to see that planet in that person. Like if somebody had a lot of planets in their fourth house, which I've experienced, is like stelliums, like huge stelliums, like five planets in the fourth house, for example, and I'm around this person and they have a very subtle personality. They don't really show those planets, especially if you're just getting to know them. I almost feel like, oh, they're really laid back, they're easy, they don't have a lot of energy, they're so calm, but actually there's something there that probably, if you knew this person better, more of their selves would come forth, more of their energies would come forth, but you don't really know because if there's those planets are there like really hidden.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, just even going off of the fourth house as this foundation, like the foundation you can kind of feel, like when you're walking around in a house with
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
shaky foundations, you can feel the floors
Oh, yeah, I love
creak
that.
beneath you. Like you know that maybe this is a bit sensitive, you don't want to walk too hard on those floors. So you can feel it maybe when you're with someone, but seeing it is more where you encounter the ascendant or maybe even the midheaven. The fourth house, it's more maybe this feeling or sensation you get that's subterranean, that's less visual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. And talking about subterranean, I would also associate the fourth house with meditation as well, because it is how we work with our inner landscape in all kinds of way, because it's the house that we can say it's our emotional baseline, as we're growing up. Like if our parents fought a lot when we're growing up,
Mm.
that's gonna be our emotional baseline. It could be stress or it could be fight or flight mode. If our parents were more restless, maybe you have a more restless emotional baseline, so on and so forth. And then we use meditation and therapy, for example, as a way
Mm.
to work through some of the stuff that we carry in the subterranean realms since childhood, since we're very young, and now we're having to work with this inner part of ourselves in order to go out into the world. And, the opposite of the fourth is the 10th house at the very top of the chart. So we can kind of go out into the world and show up in a way that we want to show up.
Right, right. And like, how are we supporting whatever we're doing in the world is going to be shown by that fourth house? Like, what kind of
Yes.
self-care, what kind of foundation,
Yes.
what kind of
Yes.
work we need to be doing in the private sphere? Because if you have a lot of planets in the 10th house, but none in the fourth, that fourth house actually becomes just as important as if you had a lot of planets in the fourth house because you're needing to balance out your foundations with anything you're putting out there publicly, right? With what you hold privately. Yeah. Mm.
Oh, I think you got cut off a bit there. I might have
Oh, I
missed
did.
what you said, the last sentences.
Oh, it's okay. No, no, I think I may have just paused and kept and just
Okay.
and just paused in the middle of my sentence. No, but I was gonna say, yeah, just essentially that the fourth house is what is supporting, the rest of the chart, but
Hmm.
especially whatever we do publicly, professionally, with the 10th house polarity there.
Yeah. And sometimes the fourth house is also referred to as the house of one of our parents, and the 10th house is the other parent. Most likely the 10th is there's some kind of debate on this, but it could be the 10th that's the father, the fourth that's the mother. Some people say the fourth is also the father, but it's one of the parents would be represented by the fourth house, meaning they could have qualities similar to the sign that's ruling your fourth house, or they're influencing, the planets that are in the fourth house in one way or another. So yeah, that's another thing that
Yes, yes, there is that debate about, yeah, whether the fourth house is the mother or the father. And I think it really has to, do with whatever resonates with people best. Um, What I
Hmm.
like that we're picking up on is that the fourth house, even though it's an angular house, which would mean that it's an active house, right? It's a place that some major activity in life is taking place, which in this case would be the private sphere, the domestic sphere, the
Hmm.
home
Hmm.
environment and what you do there. It's also hidden from view. So, very much like the eighth house and the 12th house, which are up in the day but aren't visible from the ascendant, I sort of like to link the fourth house to the eighth and 12th in a way. These realms that are subconscious
Hmm.
or, sort of spiritual because they actually make a trine with the fourth house. And the fourth house
Hmm.
being family can really show what we inherit through our families that make their way into our mental health in the 12th house or,
Hmm.
our relationship patterns in the eighth house. So the fourth house does hold sort of the DNA for our emotional, spiritual journey here and what issues we might need to work out in those ways.
Mm, yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, that those kinds of things are things that we prefer to maybe sometimes keep private from other people. And um, yeah, it's really like walking the journey inwards. I think with these three houses that you just mentioned, like the 12th, 8th, and the 4th, we're going
Yeah.
on this, there's movement, but doing this movement and we're going inwards into that. And sometimes we're actually, we can have fun with doing it outwards as well in terms of like actually tracing our, for example, ancestors, where they used to live, and like you said, the history part of things, the yeah, the history part of things, like when you do those kind of like DNA tests, you even said DNA just now, so it's like, oh, the
Yeah.
DNA test to find out where you were actually from and tracing the culture, how that influenced you, as well as how your parents influenced you. So there's all these things that have influenced us in regards to that. And I like that you linked it to the eighth and the 12th, but also I really like how this house squares the first house too. And so it's making this really intense aspect to the self. And we talked about the self last time, but as the first house really being your body, your physical body, who you are, how you want to come across your personality. And so it's like your family, they're always making this intense influence on who you are because you're kind of like, yeah, I wanna be like I mean, I love my family, they take care of me, but at the same
Mm,
time, I also want to be independent from them. And so it makes this really interesting connection to the first house of, okay, how am I gonna grow from them, grow with them, but also become my true and authentic self? So that's interesting kind of
mm.
tension between those two houses.
Right, right. It definitely feeds into the individuation process that we explored in the first house last week, which is really deciding on an identity, on what you want to carry into the world, on what your purpose is. And with the square, which is a challenge point, the fourth house brings in the family. It brings in all the conditioning, all of the ways your parents have talked to you or told you, the world is going to be. And I think that one of the feelings that can arise with that fourth first square is doubt, is like doubting oneself,
Mm,
based on the foundations. Well,
mm,
if my family didn't model to me that it could be done, that it was possible, then I have no reason to believe it's possible for me. Right. So
mm,
I'm
mm,
going to kind of
mm.
internalize whatever they showed me, and that's going to color in part what I think I can do, what I think my potential is. So I think a relationship, between the fourth and first is essential for all of us to kind of explore, to get a sense of, yeah, how am I holding what I inherited in myself?
Mhm, mhm,
What is the work there for me?
mhm. Yeah, and also with like squares, they they can also really give you, like I said, it was tension, but it's this energy. It's like when you I'm not could be like, when you like have this rubber band and you're kind of like pulling on the rubber band, it's like the more that you pull on the rubber band, the more intense it gets, but the more energy you have to put in to keep that rubber band in place. So it's this tension of the square. There's so much energy being put there. So there's with all of us, I think, as you know, human beings, it's something that everybody does. We all have this energy of individuation, and there's so much being put in there. We sometimes do it without even realizing it, almost like we are compelled to do it. We are compelled to somehow individuate. And of course, the more planets or point nodes, for example, or planets that you have there in the fourth, especially if it's squares, you know, your ascendant, the more that you're gonna have that, like, okay, how do I individuate? That can be an interesting thing to look into.
Mm, mm. So I think it's important to also talk about at this point what it would mean if somebody has a lot of planets in the fourth house, like what that's telling us about their life. Because I think sometimes people with a lot of planets in the fourth house might read about it and think, oh, so my life is all about having a family or all about staying home or, like that could very well resonate for some people. But what are some of the broader meanings, do you think, of having, let's just say a big concentration of energy there?
I think with especially with the fourth house, it's so interesting to know what planets you actually have there because of like the fourth house is such a foundational house. It's like it's kind of like it makes me think of the tower card in the tarot. You can tear it all down depending on what planets
Mm,
you have there, or you can really keep it. You have like Saturn there, you're gonna keep the foundation, but if you have Uranus there, somehow you're gonna tear that foundation down and rebuild something completely. So it really depends also what are the planets that are really influencing that fourth house because it can go either way because we're talking about foundations. But yeah, I think when
mm,
you have a lot of planets there, there will be that energy. Either you really, you know, maintain, work on, or keeping your foundations, or you're going to be somebody that's really all about, you have this energy to really deviate from that foundation. But in order to deviate, you still have to understand the foundations, your own family, your ancestries, and so on and so forth. So there will always be that element, I think, of wanting to figure out yourself from the connections that you have with your people, of your family, and so on and so forth.
mm.
What do you
And
think?
yeah, well, I was also gonna say to that point, I really like how you said that in the fourth house there is our people, You said people a lot, family, other people around, because
Belonging.
belonging, because
Yeah.
that's something I've observed of people with a lot of planets in the fourth house is that their community and who they belong to
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
incredibly important. Like, community can be a huge significator of the fourth house. And it's also in
Yeah.
square to the seventh house, which we haven't explored yet in this series, but that's all about relationships, right? So there's also something about in this fourth house, you know, it's a place for ourselves and our relationships to relax and become intimate. And I think maybe that's a way you kind of resolve that square to the ascendant and the seventh house
Mm-hmm.
axis is like by building a container where you and other people can kind of merge together and come home to each other and be
Hmm.
family.
Hmm.
Because I do consistently observe that in charts with a lot of fourth house. It's like a different kind of relationship you have with your
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
family. It's like homies, it's the
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
going to be with forever. And I think a lot of planets there, those are often people who are seeking those kinds of people to be in their life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm glad that we touched on the word belonging because I think that that is really a
Yeah.
thing here with the fourth house. If you have a lot of planets there, you really need to feel not alone, you know? Oh, it would be so
Yeah.
hard if you have a planets in the fourth house and somehow you're isolated or you feel alone. Like I don't really see that being a thing so much. I see them more as being, you know, having people that they belong with, whether it's by blood or not, but it has to feel like family. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it can be a new way of looking at family where, you know, you have a brotherhood, sisterhood kind of situation where they're not family by blood, but we take care of each other. We bring comfort. We nourish each other, and it brings that sense of belonging and obviously there has to be some level of like-mindedness there to find a place where you can belong. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of weird. But yeah, that
Mm,
element also as a part of that.
yes, yes, absolutely. And then what would you say when planets are transiting the fourth house? So we've kind of talked about when people have them there, but transits to the fourth can also be
Mm.
quite interesting to look at.
Yeah, like what I've really noticed with transits to the fourth, it somehow is usually manifests in a very practical way. So it's usually something happening around the home, like literally. Like it's either you're decorating your home. This can be one, of course, one way it happens, but a lot of the times it's because it's very fast. Transits are not something that is gonna require your whole life where you're gonna be working on it. It's something that brings, well, it depends on the transit, of course, but it can be home renovations, relocations, looking for a new home, or yeah, coming up with ideas for your actual home, what you're going to do differently about it, um, bringing people into your home, hosting more, or beautifying your home in one way or another, so on and so forth. That's one of the ways that I see this happening a lot.
Yeah. And it's funny you said relocation because it actually just made me think about astrocartography and that if
Mm-hmm.
you're relocating to a new place on the globe, I think one of the most important parts of a relocation astrocartography chart is looking
Mm-hmm.
at
Mm-hmm.
your fourth house,
Yeah.
is looking what sign it's in, what planets are there. Like that could tell you significantly about the new home you're building there. Like even if your purpose in moving is for career or a relationship or something, still really important to check that fourth house. I think regardless of where you're living,
Yeah.
just pull up a
Yeah.
chart for where you're living and check what's in that fourth house. What can I expect of this home environment?
And also, like solar returns can also be really interesting. If, like, in your solar returns
Oh,
charts, somehow now you suddenly have some planet there in the fourth house, that year will be quite a year of activity for what's going on around your home.
and I can affirm that having had Uranus in my fourth house solar return chart one year, I think this was last
Wow. Do you want
year, and
to share a little bit?
it was like the craziest year
Yeah.
of home stuff I've ever experienced. And so much change, and I had to move, right? Uranus is about unexpected changes and shocks and surprises, and that
Mm-hmm.
solar return
Yeah.
chart
Okay.
certainly delivered. So, yes, I think the fourth house can be literal home, and it can also be symbolic of the feelings of home. And perhaps the sign and planets that are there show you literal events
Mhm.
that happen at home, but also kind of the feeling maybe that home brings for you. And um, yeah, what you seek perhaps to make as your home environment, or what is of value to you in a
Yeah.
home environment as well. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Okay. Should we also briefly mention, I guess, the IC, the Ilium Coeli, which often marks the fourth house in a chart?
What would you say to that? Would
Well,
yeah, how do you feel about
The IC line is essentially a point that in Placidus usually begins the fourth house.
mm-hmm,
But in
mm-hmm.
whole sign, it can show up in really any of the three houses we're talking about tonight. And it's often
Yeah.
symbolic
Yeah.
of fourth house themes. So roots, foundations, childhood, home, what those experiences were like. So sometimes your IC won't always be in the fourth house. If you use whole sign, it might be in the fifth or the third house. And so that's all the more reason to keep listening and see what those houses are about.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. That yeah, it's possible that you could have the IC in those other houses as well if you use whole sign, which I think is super fascinating because I use whole signs.
Yeah,
And
me too. Yeah,
yeah, it really it gives a just another dimension, like something to add because you're gonna still have a fourth house, but then you still want to add, if it's different, that sign into how you approach home. Like for
right.
example, if your fourth house is Gemini and your IC is like in the third house, which would be like Taurus, then you'd have like a Gemini Taurus kind of approach to your home, and your family life would have kind of both of these flavors to them.
Yeah, right, right. Cool. Okay, so let's move on to the fifth house. I think we covered the fourth pretty sufficiently. And I can start with my pitch of the fifth house,
Mm-hmm.
which is that this is the house of children and the inner child. So this is the house that represents your own childhood, your own children. It's a succeedant house, so it is supporting the fourth house or moving towards the fourth house. And how I see that is it's whatever we sort of got from our childhood and how we are using it to create now our own legacy, our own children, our own homestead. How are we supporting our own family and our own individuation? Because really, I love children as a significator of the fifth house because I really see it as, our attitudes towards children reflecting our own childhood. And so, how do we treat our inner child? And if we have a family, how do we raise our children? Right? So,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I would begin with the fifth.
Yeah, I like that children being a part of that. And I would expand on that a little bit further into the fifth house ruling creation as a big overarching theme. Because within that creation, of course, we have children, but we also have other kinds of creations and creativity that is part of the fourth. Did I say fourth? Fifth?
The fifth
The
house.
fifth house. I don't know if I
Yeah.
said fourth before. Okay, move on
Yeah.
to the fifth house. Yeah, so the fifth house, yeah, it's a creation of all kinds. And yeah, when we talk about, let's say art or I don't know, business or whatever that's creative, and children, they are actually a very similar trajectory in life
Right.
because you don't create it from nothing. You know, creation is always from something. It's never 100% original. Whatever that creation is, right? Of course,
Yeah.
if you're having a baby, it's you cannot have it from nothing. You gotta have it from something. If you're making art, you don't just make something from nothing that you've never seen before. Usually it's little pieces of things here and there, and then you put it together and then you create it. But then what also happens is it gets passed down. So you have children, and then you have
Mm.
grandchildren, and then great grandchildren. Just like whatever you create, the person after that takes something from what you've created and creates something new. And the person in the next generation takes something from that person before or somebody else before and then creates something new, sort of. So it's a little bit
Ah.
I don't know if I would use the word legacy, but something being passed down with the fifth house.
Passing down. Right, right. Well, and what's interesting is that in the ancient world, they called the fifth house the house of pregnancy and sex as well, because it makes
Yeah.
a trine to the ascendant. And so the ascendant being the body, having a trine to this house, it was seen as something good, right? Trines being good things that
Mm,
come from the
mm,
body. And so that's why
mm-hmm.
it got associated with pregnancy and children. But I think you're totally right.
Mm,
That could be any sort of creative endeavor that stands the test of time, right? And additionally, the ancient astrologers gave Venus to the fifth house. So the fifth
mm-hmm.
house was the joy of Venus, which is all about art and creativity and beauty. So there's something really beautiful in, that creative process being able to live on and create a legacy.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, because we also mentioned previously the inner child as being what rules the fifth house. And I think when I think about that inner child state, I think of this state of like joy and sometimes also like a state of adrenaline, where the child is just really like got this energy, this adrenaline to just do, take risk and kind of do something that, adults might think is ridiculous. And I think that that could also be applied to adults when it comes to the fifth house in terms of, you need that part of your life where you get to release your adrenaline. This is a really adrenaline pumping kind of house from what I've experienced.
Mm,
So all sorts of risk-taking activities, games, gambling, for example,
yes,
is
yeah.
included here. Yeah, along with like speculative businesses of all types, something where you just get to have that adrenaline pumping, but it's a part of the innocence of the inner child that's also at play.
Mm, mm. And there's also something here for me with the fifth house being directly after the fourth house of maybe this is a bit of a rebellious quality that we see coming out of the fourth house. Like there's a little bit of, okay, well, this is what I've inherited from my family. Now this is what I'm going to do with it. This is what I'm going to create with it, right? Like these are the
Mm,
patterns and the resources that I have available. And now let me use them in some way to free myself so that
hmm
I can
hmm
create my own path. And then
hmm
that also
Yeah.
leads us back to the trine with the first house, where, the fifth and the first are supporting each other in the search for self, in the search for expression and impressing oneself upon the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you have that foundation and it's stable for you, now you get to play in the playground. You've got the fourth house that sets the playgrounds, it builds all the stuff on there, and it's good. So now you get to play in it in a sense. And the interesting thing also, like the fifth house also associated with romance in a sense, especially with,
Yes.
modern
Mm,
astrological interpretations. And I think, of course, because, Venus enjoys being here. But again, I think it also has something to do with that adrenaline. Because when you first meet somebody, when you're first getting to know somebody, it's exciting, your hormones get going. That's very, fifth house aliveness energy. Of course, it's not the house of long-term relationships because once the infatuation kind of settles, you don't have that adrenaline
right.
anymore. And so that's not the fifth house anymore. It's only that beginning stage of romance and relationship.
And it's also interesting because if you read the houses from succeedent to angular, so fifth to fourth house, then,
Mm-hmm.
to have the family,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have the fun in the fifth. You have to fall in love in the fifth to get
Yeah.
the family that you have in the fourth, and then in the
Yeah,
third, you
yeah.
add more kids or something like that. Or,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. You
you
don't want them to
you
be
you
lonely, so
they get to meet their cousins, so you can also read these houses the other direction and see, okay. But yeah, I think it really does have to deal with what you create and how you find joy. And I often find when there are difficult placements in the fifth house, like Saturn or Mars, I do
Mm,
see how that can create some harder childhood situations. I've even seen it be harder for some of these people to have children or have families in some cases.
mm,
Um, so maybe we should speak to that a little bit. Like, depending on the
mm,
planets you have in the fifth house, what does that tell us about generally, your childhood and how you grow
mm.
out of that and what you create from it?
Yeah, yeah. So what I feel as you're speaking is that okay, so every house can be psychologically interpreted as what we like to do. We like to,
Sure.
go deep into the yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that with the fifth house, it really is the house where we seek recognition. That's kind of the psychology behind it. It's,
Hmm.
the inner child that does something, and the parent says, "Great job," or not. And so there's this need for validation that exists with the fifth house. And so I feel like when you have a lot of planets there, or there's a lot of emphasis, or whatever signs ruling your fifth house, you could be somebody that is either, really recognized in the world in one way or another. But that's usually coming from you being very confident and solid in your own creation, whatever you're creating.
Hmm.
But there can also be the tougher side to the fifth house, which is seeking external validation and recognition. And sometimes having Saturn there, for example, makes it very hard for you, if you have that, to, because Saturn is the planet that's really about social, societal norms and making sure that we align with the status quo in one way or another. That kind of energy in the fifth house, it can make it so that you're creating something, but once you've created it, it's more about what do other people think of it rather than how do I
Right.
actually feel about it.
Right, right. Well, and I do think validation maps on very well as a theme to the fifth house because, in order to have a romance and have a child, we need to feel
Mm.
validated.
Oh,
In order to grow up a happy child or to raise children, they need a ton of validation. And in
yeah,
order to
yeah.
create, oftentimes as adults, not a lot of people are around to give us that validation. So we have to be able to give it
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
ourselves. And maybe sometimes that risk taking or that overdoing it, it can be sort of that cry for validation, right? Like, oh, look at me doing this, something risque, something
Yeah.
promiscuous, whatever.
Yeah.
And there can be unhealthy ways of seeking, that creative source that's innate. And sometimes,
Yeah.
depending on the planetary signatures here, you might have to do some work on getting back to that source of your creativity with or
Yeah.
without other people's opinions.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like, if because our minds can affect our body. And if you want to create something, and especially if it's like a kid, because you want validation, because you want your parents to love you, that can't be a thing, right? It's our society. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, I want to have a kid because I want to be approved or I want to be accepted in society. That's not
Right.
really the motivation that is healthy for any kind of creation, especially children, right? We create because we love to create, and we love what we create because we create it from love, not from the need for validation.
Right, right. And I think it's so interesting when you look at from the fourth house to the fifth house, it's sort of like, well, what foundations is somebody's self-esteem built on? Fourth house,
Ooh,
what
right,
foundations is
right.
somebody's life depending on? And then in the fifth
Mm,
house, how easy is it then for them to separate from those foundations and become their own individual and become their own person? You know, is there still some work to do in the fourth
yeah,
house to give us that
yeah,
base from which we can create from? You know, um,
exactly.
otherwise we could kind of be in that stunted maturation process where
Yeah.
we don't know who we are without the applause. And that's just showing where there's a bit more work to do on, yeah, those deeper foundations of self-confidence and self-love and giving
Mm-hmm.
ourselves once again that sense of belonging to something. Because I
Yeah.
think being the triad of the home, the fifth house, it still wants to belong in some way. It's opposite the 11th house, which is like groups and community. And so there can also be this desire to belong, to be part of
Yeah.
something greater. But,
Mm.
when we're children, we're so in our ego, we're so conscious of ourselves that it can be, we can take everything personally. And so, um, maybe it's also about working on that a bit in the fifth house as
Yeah.
well, like getting a little bit outside of your own ego
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
learning to play nice with others on the playground too.
Yeah. Just mature a little. Yeah.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
everything has to be, a competition or, not everybody's out to get you or, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also not everybody has to be your friend also. Like there are
Yeah.
adjustments we're making in the fifth house to leaving the comfort of the home and going out there and being a kid and creating something or sharing something.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of the ego, it's almost like as you're saying that, what I'm seeing is like, okay, we have this home, right? And so we have the foundation, which is the fourth house. And now we have to kind of decorate the home. So we have to get creative and we have to do the interior design. And that's kind of like a fifth house thing. And of course, this house is also in ancient astrology, it's called the house of enjoying. So, you want to decorate the home so you can enjoy and live in the home. But then, how if the ego is involved here, we decorate the home so that we can show it to other people. That's kind of what I'm sensing as you're speaking. So, okay, I can do
Mm.
that. I can decorate my home so when people come over, they like it, it looks nice. But do I like it? Do I enjoy this? Is this my expression? So we have that, interesting way of looking at it too.
Right, right. And I think that can honestly just be such a hard journey, regardless of having planets there or not. It's just the journey from, am I doing this to keep up with society, to make my parents happy, to please other people, or am I
Yeah.
doing it from my heart's joy? And I think the fifth house really
Yeah.
does challenge us with finding our heart's joy and deconditioning ourselves from the validation of parents, from the validation of, the people we've grown up with and becoming our own people. And I think that, even though it's the house of good fortune or the house of enjoyment, it still has its challenges, which are stripping away
Mm,
from,
mm.
you know, those externalized forms of validation, attention.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the because you mentioned good fortune, which is also the other name of for this house. And I think that
Yeah,
there's something to be said about good fortune that comes because you have the choice you made the decision yourself to do what it is that you're doing, you know. And you have the willpower to do it. You're manifesting something for yourself and enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, if you're there's gonna not gonna be good fortune coming to you. So within the enjoyment, then you have this, kind of, yeah,
Ah,
good
it
fortune.
kind of gives me like the Nine of Cups card in the tarot, which is that, very
Ah,
large man who's just
yeah,
enjoying all
yeah, yeah.
these cups that he's drunk from. And then he's sitting there sort of waiting for the next one. He's like, when's the next one gonna come? And, he's clearly full, he's
Yeah,
clearly had
yeah, yeah,
enough, but he is
yeah,
waiting for the
yeah.
next thing. So sometimes in the fifth house, of shadow could be maybe we don't see how good we have it at times, or there could be the development of gratitude so
Mm.
that we don't miss out on all the great things that surround us. We might take those things for
Yeah,
granted.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. And then
Mm.
transits to the fifth house, you want to add any commentary on?
Ooh. Well, Trans to the fifth house, I think they don't hit as heavily as angular houses, like with
Yeah,
the fourth house, and something's definitely happening. But I think it's still there, and I think it marks some kind of important time in your life for, yeah, for really tapping into your joy, I feel like. And of
yeah.
course, for either being more with children, or I mean, some people will say, oh, it's maybe a good time to have children, but it could also just be a good time to be around children or to have them in your life more, depending on like other things in your chart.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely seen transits, activations of the fifth house be creatively oriented. Like there is
Yeah,
definitely,
like your
you know,
hobbies.
hobbies. Yeah, a great time
Yeah,
to start
yeah,
new projects, to
yeah,
put yourself out there, to do something you've always wanted to do, just to indulge the
yeah,
pleasure of that and
yeah, yeah,
not feel the
yeah.
need to ask for permission, just to go for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
Um, Sometimes it can also be like a time when you might be taking a bit more risk. So you might also want to be a little
Mm.
bit careful with that. It can be a time where you are maybe spending more on something and then kind of like not, gambling or something, and you're not kind of not getting that back in return. But, it all depends on various different things, but that's something to watch out for as well.
Definitely, definitely. No, the risk-taking aspect of the fifth house is funny, really, to consider because
Yeah.
it's so true. I have seen that before. And if you think about it, I just think about childhood and all the stupid shit I did when I was a kid, Like
Uh-huh.
I was always, I don't know, just staying out late with friends, going to the creek, not telling my mom where I was.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I was a big heckler.
Ooh.
I would always
Oh.
say heretical things out in public and get people's attention. And
Oh.
they would be inappropriate. I was like an inappropriate, foul-mouthed kid. And I would,
Right, right. Yeah.
sometimes get in trouble for that. But it was the thrill and the fun and the look at me. And
Yeah.
oh, it's so funny,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that
I'm
I
expressing
remember
myself. So what? Yeah.
doing. Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it
Mm.
was from that kind of place of, can I get your attention? Can I, you know, can I stand out in some way? Which of course I channeled through
Mm.
theater eventually and other things like that. But we all do that as kids, I think, in some way to garner
I
that
think we all love
attention,
to
that
dance and
validation.
act and stuff as kids, right?
We
Yeah.
also love to do that too. And I have seen the fifth house surely relate to performance as well. And because of that
Yeah,
trine with the first house, I also see it as like a very physical house too. So things that you can do with your body and movement and
that is
dance,
true.
stuff like that.
That's
Mm,
true. Yeah, yeah.
wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to our last house in this
Mm-hmm.
triad. The third house, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
really excited to talk about. I think the third house is the most complex of these three houses. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just excited to hear your thoughts. So, you want to kick us off with the third house?
All right. Well, when I think of the first house, I think of
The
something
third
that's
or
the third.
the third? Sorry, I
What?
thought you said the first house. Never mind. Third
Oh, no,
house,
no, the third.
communication. Communication in the third house. Here we are.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Uranus, Gemini.
Uranus, Gemini.
But yeah, so when I think of the third house, I think of things that are very fast. There's a busyness, there's a fast pace to the third house. And when we think of, things that are very fast moving, we think of like, okay, walking, I walk to the shop next door, I walk to my neighbors. So it's really like a short distance kind of travel kind of situation. And that's usually just in your neighborhood, that area. So we talk about the home, but now we have the home next to us and the home next to us and the home next. So it's this, environment space where we can get to be a little bit busier than just secluded in the home. We get to be, do a bit of visiting here and there with our neighbors. So that's kind of
Mm.
the first thing that I uh, think of when I think of a third house. And also the ancient astrologers called this house to perceive. And I was like, what did they call it to perceive? And then I did a little etymology situation, which I like to do, and I'm like curious
Yeah.
about words and stuff. And then apparently, of course, per means through, and sieve
Mm.
means to grasp or to take. So it actually, we can say the word perceive is coming from through taking or through grasping. So what does that actually mean? So it's, this idea of having a direct experience with something. So the third house is very interactive house. You're having a direct
Mm.
experience with something. You need to see it and touch it and feel it and experience it. And you need to do it fast and do a lot of it. And then, you learn from that. You store it in your mind and you talk about it or you share it or you write it or you keep it or you just store it in there. So that's kind of this energy of the third house. And of course, when it comes to the home as well, we also talk about our siblings because our
Mhm.
siblings are, there's more than one. So third house is that house of like, there's more than one. There's more than one home. You have a neighborhood. There's more than one kid. You have siblings. So it's an interesting and very fun house, I think.
Yeah, yeah, right. And traditionally as well, it's the joy of the moon, which I love, in
Yes.
line with the
Yes.
significations of classically, it's, the house of local community, of neighbors, of siblings, of short distance travel. And you think about the moon, and the moon does move very fast in the sky, right? It's the fastest moving
Yeah.
celestial
Yeah.
body. But it's also our home planet. So it's always, it's orbiting our home. So there's something about the
Yeah.
third house
Orbiting the
about being
home is cute.
very busy where you are and having lots of
Yeah.
routines and touchstones and people that you know that are around you. Like, I really think of the village square when I think of the third house. Like, it's where you
Yeah.
go to get your coffee and you know the barista and you know there's your grocer, there's your butcher, there's your baker. Like, you
Yeah.
just know everybody there. And then you also would have your neighbors there, your siblings there. What I find interesting about that as well is that these aren't necessarily people that you seek out on your own. They are just kind of around, right? Siblings, they're just kind of there. Neighbors, they're just
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
there. You don't necessarily go out and select these people. These people, in a way, are just given to you in your
Mm.
life. And I think that that's
Mm.
such an under talked about style of relationship that we have. Like, I think about
Mm.
roommates.
Mm.
I've grown up most of
Mm.
my 20s in share houses. And I really think of the third house as like the big share house. Like, what are roommates? Where do roommates go in a birth chart? Well, in the third house, it would make sense because they're people that you just kind of share things with, and maybe you cook for, or you catch up for a conversation, but it's not like they're your permanent family. It's not like they're your children. They're this whole other category of relationship. So I find that really fascinating.
Yeah. And I think with that, because we can't choose these people, like you said, the third house also comes with this trait or this quality of adaptability and flexibility because you have to be like you grew up with some siblings that you don't even know if you're going to get along with them, but it's just there. You have to do everything
Yes.
together, so you have to adapt to them. And these roommates, I don't even know if we're going to get along, but I just have to adapt to them. So it's that kind of energy. Even when we talk about like because they're in your vicinity and you can't choose them, so it's the people within the close environment that you have. So it's also like how do you adapt to your environment? Because depending on, it's not just people, but like it could be like how do you adapt to like let's say you were somebody who's always in the city and now you live in the countryside, for example. Now you're adapting. When your neighborhood before was a very busy city neighborhood and you live in the countryside, now you've got more greenery, you've got more, I don't know, animals around you. So now you're adapting to that. And so you're changing your environment according to that.
Mm, mm. And I think it's through these experiences we have in the third house, we develop a communication style. Because on its own, like the third house
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily show up as communication for me. It's more that through the events of the third house, we develop communication skills. So we learn how to communicate with
Mm.
people who, maybe aren't our immediate choice. We learn how to be amiable. We learn how to have small talk. We learn how to have um,
Mhm.
that good front-facing conversation. But we're not necessarily, not that you can't have deep relationships in the third house, like you definitely can, but it's kind of how then we mask maybe socially. And I think that can also be a big anxiety in the third house is like masking at times
Mm.
and sort of like having to wear different masks based on the community you're in, and then sometimes feeling like, well, who actually am I underneath it all? Like I see a ton of significations of famous actors in the third house, weirdly enough. And I think that's like such an actor
Ooh, okay.
struggle. Is sort of like
Hmm.
you might be on this film set and know how to act around these people. You might be in this theater play
Mm.
and know how to act with the crew. But you're always sort of
Yeah.
changing roles. And so your communication is really good at adapting, like you said.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
mm,
Yeah, and I think like well, depending on where you're going within the houses in the chart, but if you're going from the first house and you get to the third house, you kind of begin to learn something with your mind, where it's not purely just for survival anymore, but it's for interacting in one way or another. This is when you actually first get to do that. You don't do that in the first or second house, but in the third house, oh, now I'm actually learning something. And that, okay, one of those first things could be, language, walking,
mm,
running, short movements here and there. So we're actually learning and picking up things in the third house. And that's why it also has to do with communication, the mind, but also with taking classes, but like short classes, like workshops and things like that, where you just learn something really quickly because, yeah, you're interested in it. And yeah, it's fun to do. And it's engaging to your mind in one way.
yes, yes. Yeah, it's definitely maybe the first house where we're dealing with other people and we're kind of being exposed to all sorts of new relationships that teach us about connection and conversation. And we
Hmm.
might find ourselves here through our relationships, our local community. And I think
Hmm.
as well, a lot of social habits are sown in the third house. Like I think that the third house can also develop like the school, or sorry, describe the school that you went to when you were younger. Sometimes it gets associated with early education. And like, what
Mm.
was your experience when your mom first dropped you off at school and you had to go in and meet people? Like that to me is very third house. It's like that initial lesson in communicating and getting along with other kids. And maybe some kids were comfortable being very authentic and being very upfront with who they are, whereas other kids were, a lot more shy, a lot more nervous in that environment. Maybe they began masking. And so there can be, big lessons in the third house as we get older around communication and interacting with other people. And that can, of course, contribute to your learning style as well.
Yeah, and as what you were mentioning, like because this is such a house that has to do with our social skills, we can say.
Yeah.
It is actually like a small talk kind of house, you know? It's like
Yeah.
when you just start having a conversation with someone and you kind of break the ice. It's an icebreaker kind of house. You know, how do you do that? That's done with the third house, you know, before we get into the ninth house, which, you know, we ask deeper questions about the meaning of life and existential questions. So we don't go to that right away with people, although we can. But yeah, we tend to do that small talk kind of thing first. How are you doing? With the third house.
Hmm.
And I think we should also mention at some point that third house also has a lot to do with social media and getting your voice out there. Like, you know, podcasting is could be like a third house. But it's also that's
Yeah.
also ninth house as well. So both of these houses kind of situation. But yeah, kind of like
Yeah.
um, marketing or social media, which markets and promotes something. It's also associated with the third house.
Well, and what do all of those things have in common with, early education and transportation, daily transportation is these are all things you have to update on a daily basis. They are
Yes.
constant.
Yes.
Social media is
Yeah.
like a constant that you're updating or that
Yes.
you're checking. School or
Or the
class is,
news.
or news, right? And then school
Yeah.
is something that you're constantly having to show up for. Like
Yeah.
just like the moon, there's something very rhythmical about the third house. There's something very
Yes. Yes.
consistent and scheduled and routine
Yes.
about the
Yeah.
third house as well. So it can also be where we get caught in a routine, good or bad
Yeah.
sometimes, but hopefully it's a routine that allows us to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep
Mhm.
unraveling.
Yeah, and it's also like when we're talking about things that are just recurring, I also think now of like entertainments, like series that we keep watching and we keep recurring to. Like Netflix is like a third house thing, and it's there, you turn it on, you rewatch and rewatch, and you watch something and it's recurring, you know, that kind of situation.
Yeah, just kind of like the moon, the joy of the moon.
Yeah,
She's following her same cycle, and
yeah.
every single time we see the moon, we're all freaking out like an alien is dropping down from the skies, but it's the same moon we've seen, hundreds of times, but we're still just so in awe. We're still so fascinated by it and
Yeah,
in love with it in
yeah,
some way. And that's so similar to like even our siblings, It's like
yeah,
or our neighbors or people we've known for a long time is
yeah.
years and
It's just
years can
there.
go by and we're still like, oh my gosh, when we see them, there's something
Oh, yes.
divine. And I do think that's another aspect of the third house that is so under talked about is the divinity in the third house because traditionally the ninth house, its opposite, is the house of God, and the third
Hmm.
house is the house of
The
goddess.
goddess, yeah.
So there's also something about the third house that's more, um, it's more ritualistic. It's more,
Hmm.
um, you know, it's more embedded in the daily routine of, say, the religion or the spiritual practice you follow. While the ninth house is like maybe the temple that you go to observe God. The third
Yes.
house
Yeah.
is like the daily implementation of the prayer, of the meditation, of whatever you're doing to keep your vessel open to God, goddess, right? So there's also something about spiritual hygiene and maintenance that's happening in the third house that I really love about this house as well.
Ooh. Yeah, as you were speaking, I'm thinking of like journaling, like daily ritualistic journaling. I think this is like a
Yes,
really third house scenario. And like these planners and things that have been given to you, it's also a little bit like that. Like this astrological planner, you know.
very
The
third
divinity of
house.
that, you know. I'm timing things out with the phases of the moon and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah. And the ninth house also could be seen as, the broader study of something like astrology. But then a
Mhm.
third house experience of astrology might be giving a reading, right? Or might be doing a podcast about it or something
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there are
Mhm.
these ways that we're sort of making things digestible and applicable in the third house, while the ninth house could be, more so the broader concept we're
Yeah.
breaking down from. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Wow,
do think,
beautiful.
yeah, there's so many beautiful aspects of the third house. I think they also in the ancient tradition call it like the least good of the good houses and the least bad of the bad houses. Like, and
That's
that's
very
and that's
third
really
house.
interesting because there is a dark quality to the third house I wanted to hit on, which is the fact that
Okay.
it's a cadent house. And,
Yeah.
the other cadent houses are the sixth, the 12th, and the ninth. And I
Hmm.
think as a cadent house, the third house represents something that is falling away from the angle. So the angle in this case is the fourth house, which
Hmm.
is the home, the family, the roots, the foundations. And what would it mean if the third house is falling away from the roots, the foundations, the home?
Mm.
Might this be, people who kind of go out into the world, and their family is not per se the biggest part of their life anymore. Maybe they're looking to move away from family. Maybe they're, also adopted or people who aren't
Mm.
necessarily connected to the root of the lineage. I think there's something mysterious
Mm.
about that with the third house, with sort of family
Mm.
relations that are alternative or that are just
Mm.
not your normal way of doing family.
Yeah, I think like when you like when you're touching on like the dark side of the third house, what I'm also sensing into is like your relationships with your siblings. Like I
Yes.
don't think siblings really ever really like each other, and there's something weird about that. I mean, of course, you can have many,
Yeah.
sisters and brothers that love each other a lot, but a lot of times, it's like, there's some,
Well,
I don't know, strange. You know what I'm saying?
yeah. Well, there's always that, I think, anxiety underlying sibling relationships where, who's more loved, who gets more
Yeah, the
attention.
competition, the sibling rivalry,
There's the sibling rivalry.
and there's
Yeah.
like this theory that if you have a sibling, oh, oh, sorry, I think you
No.
froze for a bit there.
No, no, no.
No, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this theory that within a two sibling household, we'll go with two. One of them always has to be the rebellious one, and the other one has to always be the traditional one that follows the parents' path. If you look in any household, you will have these two splits. So there's something about the duality. And sometimes that duality can be a dark side of the third house. But I think the embracing of
Mm,
duality can be the beautiful part of it. But that split, it's such a, I mean, you know, it's kind of like a Gemini kind of situation happening where there's like a
yeah.
split. It's like a split personality, and here we have that split. And it's interesting. I don't know if you experienced that with your, do you have like a siblings and
I
stuff
do.
like
I
that?
do have one sibling who I love very much. I know he has a placement in the third house, which I've always observed because I'm like, what does that say about me? But
Nice.
it is really curious, I think that whole question of like who are you in your family? You can look to all three of
Yeah.
these houses for that, but I think the third tells a really interesting story about, yeah, maybe like your status within the family and specifically your relationship with the siblings. Like where do you
So
stand?
obviously your sibling is probably the traditional one.
No. No.
Oh,
I'm
you're the traditional one. What? How?
I'm
Wait,
definitely
you have to tell me more about that.
that makes me so that's so funny. No, I definitely no, because when I was growing up, I was way more like by the book of what my parents said. I mean, I was, taking
Oh,
risks and
okay.
being artistic and doing
Okay.
creative things,
Okay.
but my parents were very much the rules I followed. My brother, meanwhile, not to out my brother, but my brother was way more like, I don't want to be at home.
Oh,
I don't want to be around these people. Like, I want to go out with my friends. I want to go to
okay.
parties. And like, I was
Okay.
way more the kid who was like, I just want to be at home on the weekends.
And
So,
now you've switched roles, or I
I
mean,
mean,
come on,
maybe,
you're an astrologer. I don't think is that something your parents do?
well, maybe, well, we're from California, so it's pretty,
Oh, okay.
pretty
Yeah.
normalized there, actually. But seriously, it is interesting what you said because I do observe that, and maybe the third house says something about where you are on that scale of
Hmm.
sibling relationships,
Yeah, yeah.
sibling psychology. Yeah, it's
Sibling
very
relationship in
interesting.
relation to your parents.
Yeah, which only siblings can really know what that is.
I think so, yeah. There's almost like a
If you
little
don't have a sibling, it's
inside
hard to, it is.
thing
It is.
happen.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it would be, I guess we haven't really talked about what it means if you have a lot of planets here or transits here. Do you want to add a comment on that before we move
Mm.
on? Or, yeah.
Ooh. I mean, if you have a lot of plans in the third house, you're super busy, I would say. Like you're just like
Okay.
you probably filled up your whole calendar with like a bunch of things to do and you get around and
That's a great
it's probably just
perspective.
something, in the area, but yeah.
Yeah, very busy. And also something I've seen of people who have a lot of third house is that sometimes they did have a lot of siblings. And I was never like this. I didn't
Yes.
come from a big family, but sometimes people who come from big families, it's like they're always busy because it's always someone's birthday or there's always an event or like there's always something on to do with your family.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I have definitely seen that with people with a packed third house. It's like they have
Yeah.
a lot of family obligations or things that just see, and I think this is the cadent quality of the third house, is it sort of pulls you out of maybe what you necessarily want to do, like the fourth house being that angle, being that more active place. I
Hmm.
feel like that offers you more the agency in the home, in your
Hmm.
roots and your
Hmm.
foundations. The third house, it's sort of the things that take you out of the home that you have to tend to, right? Like family
Yeah.
reunions, gatherings,
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
siblings, family health
Yeah.
problems, like all the things that
Yeah.
kind of you have to tend to. I think that can
Yeah.
also show up as like people who have a lot of obligations to family, or
Yeah.
siblings at the very least.
Or
Yeah.
neighbors. But I
Or
think if you have
neighbors. Yeah.
some, yeah, like
Yeah.
planets that are just positively aspect in that third house, it can really bless you with some smooth relationships with your neighbors. And I think that can kind of be
Mhm.
important. Like I have no planets in my, did I say fifth house, third house? I said
That's
fifth
it.
house. Like I have no plans in my third house and I don't have that energy to go out and get to know my neighbors. And sometimes I wish I had that energy because they can be, it can really be a really helpful thing to
Yeah.
lead to the fourth house and make you feel like you belong. Because if you don't have that energy to get to know the people around you or to interact with the people in your neighborhood, you may not feel that belonging with the fourth house as easily.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but also, I think because now with the world of the internet and social media, we also find that kind of belonging online as well. And that could be also
Yes.
a bit of a third house influence coming in there too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very similar to the 11th house, which for
Yeah.
years was just groups and communities. Now we have communities online, right? Now you
Yeah.
can contact neighbors, siblings, and if the third house is people we see every day, I mean, we are third housing every day by scrolling through, all the people
Yeah.
we
Yeah, I've seen
follow. So,
exactly this
so,
person's story. I mean,
so
like,
in
I'm
the
up to
third
date.
house, sort of, yeah, it's like
I'm not
everyone
watching the news. I'm just watching people's stories they were getting
exactly, it's
into.
kind of a third house thing. It's like it's kind of involuntary. You just sort of click on it. You kind of go,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's what this person's doing. Yeah, so maybe that third house function is even more inflated by social media. And I agree that social media and writing and anything that requires that consistent kind of daily effort belongs in the third house for
Yeah.
sure. And you could
But
also
I
look
have
at
noted because I've
yeah.
yeah, because like you said, like the 11th house is a little bit also like maybe even more so with social media and online presence than the third house is. But I think really if somebody has planets just in the third house and really like it brings them a little bit of that traditionalness where they really go about in their actual physical neighborhoods and their community in the physical space. They're very much about that more than the online space.
Yeah. Oh, I
That's what
100%
I've seen, yeah.
agree. I 100% agree. Yeah. These really feel like people who love to like canvas and they love to advocate, on a local level. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just getting the idea of like a mayor in the third house. It
Yes.
feels like, mayors or
Yeah.
people who are on city council teams or neighborhood watch teams or,
Yes,
the
yes,
local. And
yes.
that's something I love about the third house is it really does spotlight locality and it
Yeah.
it takes you back to maybe not the home you grew up in, which would be the fourth house, but the surrounding town, the surrounding neighborhood, the school that you went to, all the places that
Yeah.
sort of are around
Yeah.
that childhood um dwelling, that
Yeah.
main base camp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which
Yeah.
is so
That's so
important to
cute.
our daily
I think
well-being
it's very
as
cute.
well, is having like a positive
No,
third.
it's like I
Yeah,
know it brings this I don't know, it brings a cutesy feeling. Like every time I go, like when I go back home to Bangkok, like my
yeah.
neighbor is still there, the same neighbor that I've had since I was 5 years old. Like he's still there opposite to my house. We say hi sometimes. We don't interact too much, but like he's there, and it brings this kind of like, oh, a bit of a nostalgic, very moon type of
Yes.
feeling.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to stop with the third house. And now I would like to just sort of look back on these three houses and what they all tell us about how we experience home life and this more private sphere of the chart. I want to open this by saying that I actually relocated to a place in the world in Australia where most of my planets in my relocation chart are in the third, fourth, and fifth
Mm.
house.
Oh,
So,
really?
actually,
Okay.
a lot of what we've been talking about today
Mm-hmm.
resonates. Since getting here,
Mm-hmm.
my focus has been so drawn in on my home. Number one, I'm living on an
Mm-hmm.
IC
Mm-hmm.
line here. So,
Mm-hmm.
home is like a huge part of my life. And then also, like, I've really witnessed how that having that strong home base has allowed me to like go out into the fifth house and create things with the people I love and express
Mm-hmm.
myself. And then I've also
Mm-hmm.
noticed how having a strong home base allows me to go out and be in great neighborhoods and make wonderful friends and contacts. And like when we have that steady base in the fourth house, or we make peace with whatever's in the fourth house, right? We might have to put work into the fourth house. It allows us to be stable so that all the great things that surround having, a stable home can emerge. So I really think that fourth house is critical to not only our physical safety and security, but our emotional and spiritual maturation and well-being. I feel like before moving here, I didn't have as clear of a sense of like of what home was or of what my foundation was. And then when I came here, I felt
Mm-hmm.
like home became really strongly rooted.
Wow.
And
Do you have
everything
any
else
planets
kind
in
of
your natal chart in these three houses natally before you? Yeah.
I do, well, I do technically, yeah, have an outer planet in the fifth house, but no, I don't really have many planets
Okay.
populating the lower half of my chart. So it's been a really different experience to be in a place
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
home is so central to the narrative. And then you see when that's the case, how fifth house matters come about easier, creativity, self-confidence. And then third house. I know all of my neighbors, and I am so close with my
Wow.
baristas and everyone who works at the grocery store. Like everything is so localized. So I thought that anecdote would be helpful to kind of help us
Okay, that makes
reflect.
sense. Because every time I check your stories, you are, somewhere in the cafe next door, knowing, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. You really get around. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Oh, and like
Yeah.
markets are a big thing I've done here, like going to
Oh,
markets, doing
yes.
readings, like that's a very
Mm.
third house thing. But
Oh,
see,
very
if
nice.
I didn't have a, stable sense of home here where I was able to build foundations, then I wouldn't be able to go to the marketplace or do the creative project because that fourth house is so essential to making all the rest possible, I
And
think.
which planets are there in your relocation chart?
In my relocation chart, I have my Leo stellium in the fifth house, and then I have my Cancer planets in the fourth,
Okay.
and then Jupiter
Oh,
in the third
so
house.
okay.
So I have
All right. So you
quite
have
a
like an Aries rising situation.
yeah, it's an
Very
Aries
nice.
rising chart. So I
Okay.
have like all of the houses matching the zodiacal sign numbers. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
So.
goodness. Jupiter in
mm,
the third. Okay. Nice,
Yes,
nice.
yes. So many contacts, so many people I just know from just being around, not like people I haven't had
Wow.
to try it all hard to meet. Like that I just know because I know them.
How long have you been there now?
I have been there, gosh, 3 or 4 years. So yeah,
Ah, okay. All
significant.
right.
Yeah. But any
Very
any
nice.
wrapping up, concluding thoughts on this story of home and how it weaves through these three houses?
I think we covered a lot. And I think that with the way that you shared your experience, that was very insightful. And it's always nice to have a real life example of how
Yes,
that manifests itself. Yeah.
yes,
Um,
yes,
yeah, I don't know if I have anything else
absolutely.
to add.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, then that concludes our triad of the home. I guess well, I guess I'll say actually before we officially conclude, just in sum, that this part of the chart, based on what we've discussed and based on my lived experience, really is the area of the chart that's for you and your private life. It's the part of life that only you get to experience. When we move up to houses like the
Mm,
10th, the 11th, the ninth, there's a lot of exposure, there's a lot of worldly conflict we're dealing with. And we're having
mm,
to really deal with kind of these larger interpersonal forces. And I think when you're in that lower level of the chart, that night realm, you're dealing more with your own private life, with your own journey. You're
hmm.
you're you're less so put under the pressure of society or the greater world. You're more so focused on getting your foundations in order. And I think that it's a huge
Yeah.
blessing to have planets there because it really wires you into how to take care of yourself and how to live a truly meaningful life from the inside out.
Mm, that's beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, well, now concluding this Triad of the Home podcast. Tan, thank you so much for being here with me. Where can people
Thank you,
find you
Ethan.
and connect with you for readings?
Ah, yes. So I am on YouTube. My channel name is Tan Astrology, and you will find the links to my website there in the About section of my YouTube channel. And I'm
Yeah,
also on Instagram, tan.astrology, and TikTok, the same, tan astrology.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. And I'll leave Tan's links in the show notes as well as my own. But thank you all so much for being here. And we hope this video was of benefit to you today. If you have planets in the third, fourth, or fifth, or having transits there, hopefully this video answered some of your questions and gave you some insight
Yes,
to your life as it's unfolding in this very
your personal
private,
journey. Yes.
subterranean, gorgeously intimate sphere. All right, we'll see you guys next
All
time.
right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.